All right, so we were just going over some of the API that Mongoose gives us to interact with the database. Let's now see how we can integrate this with the rest of the application that we've been working on for a while. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to create schemas and models to be able to store the current data that we currently are storing in the server's memory. And right now we have several services that we're using for retrieving users and websites. What we're going to do is that we're going to create schemas and models that will allow us to store the data not here as arrays on the server on the server's memory. Instead, we're going to make them store them directly in the database, right? So let's work on that. Currently, we have implemented the user service that currently has the following users: Alice, Bob, Charlie, and Janunzi, and exposes the data model through these endpoints here. And this is already working. Let's see. Let me. I'll start the server here, and if we navigate there, and we go on to the assignment, we can go to the login. We can log in as any of these users, and we can see that the profile and the website and whatnot, these are all being retrieved from these endpoints that we created earlier, right? So, for instance, the login is using the find users. The profile will allow us to modify using the update over here, the put. But currently, they're all using this array here in the database as a database. Right? So we want to replace this to use an actual database instead. So to do that, we already have a placeholder for testing that our database connection is working. We had the test app, which tested whether your application was indeed connecting to your local database or connecting to MLab. And so we're going to leave that in place. We are going to use the same exact database that we've been using so far. I'm going to comment it out. And that's going to be connecting to, here's a test. Instead, we're going to connect it to something else. I think we had created, what did we create? I think it was webdev summer 2017. We'll use that instead. Let's see if it connects. I'll start the database, the server, see if it connects to a database. Okay, it looks like it connected. It's not complaining, at least. So now that it's connected, let's start creating the schemas and the models to start interacting with the database and store all this information in the database. So under the assignment directory, I'm going to create a couple other directories here. We'll create the models directory under there, and that's where we're going to put all our database implementation. Also under here, what we should have done, what we didn't do earlier, these services should also live under their own directory, right? So let's do that. We hadn't done it earlier. So this will be services. It will move these services under there. It looks like we got an error here, timeout. It looks like it was trying to connect to the remote database. So our code in our app.js doesn't look like it's working properly. I believe it's trying to connect to MLab username, probably because I did declare at some point locally on my machine. So I'm just going to comment this out for a second. To force it to try and connect to my local database. Let's see. Let's try it again. No, even worse. Oh well, now we moved the services into a different directory. Let's make sure we update our references so that it references these services in the correct place under services. There we go. Okay, let's restart. What's it complaining? Okay, so now these services, because we moved them, it's looking for express one. It needs to be one directory above. Let's try it again. Okay, let's see. It looks like it's not complaining. All right. Okay, so we're connected to a database. Let's now focus on the models. What do we want to store there? Let's see. For the users, we want to store things that have usernames, passwords, first name, last name. So this basically tells us what the schema is, right? So I'm just going to copy this as the schema, as a starting point for the schema, and I'm going to create a schema for this in a separate file, in a JavaScript file. And we'll call this user.schema.server.js. In here, we're going to load Mongoose because we're going to create a schema object in here. And we can do that with Mongoose. So var Mongoose. Let's require Mongoose. And now that we have Mongoose, we can create the schema right here. So we'll say var user schema is equal to mongoose dot schema, and we'll use that JSON object as a starting point. Okay, well, we don't really need the ID. That's a field that's the database is gonna create it, and this is going to be a string. Then we have the password, which is also going to be a string. We have the first name, which is also going to be a string. Last name is going to be a string. And probably this is going to be up here. Let's indent this correctly. There we go. And this is going to be a Boolean. There we go. All right, so we have a schema. Now that we have the schema, we want to make that schema available to the rest of the world, right? To make it available, we can do module.exports equal user schema. That means that anybody who imports this, right? They're going to be having access to our user schema right here. All right. All right. So we have that. Let's now create our model. So the model is going to include the schema plus all the affordances, right? All the actions that we can take on the users. Right? So let's create that. It'll be user dot model dot server dot JS. Okay. We'll need Mongoose here. So yes.
For the assignment, should it follow the JSON array we have here, or people document? Because it's different. There's no exact field.
Oh, there isn't. Yeah. Whatever the assignment says.
Okay. So like for the websites array, how would you do that?
For the
In the user model, like for the websites array?
oh, for the array of websites. Yeah, let's do that a little later.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do that. We don't have websites just yet, so we can't do it just yet. So let's load Mongoose. So let's require Mongoose. We'll also need the schema that we just created, the user schema, and we can load it. It's in the same directory. So we say /, and it's user schema. There it is. So now we have user schema right here. We declare it in a separate file, but we're loading it and we have it available right here. Whatever we export, we have it available right here. Then we need a connection to a database, but the connection to the database is way down here in app.js. Let's see. It's somewhere It's in this. It's this mongoose here, right? This connect. That's really what we want. How can we do that? Let's see. What we could do is make this a module, a reusable module. Okay, let's do that. I'm going to grab this whole content, and I'm going to put it under the models. I'm going to put it in a separate JavaScript file. I'll call it database. Right, in the database, I'm going to paste the same content I just added earlier. I don't really need the test API, so I'm removing that. I'm only going to keep the connection string. And I don't really need the app.js because I'm not going to create a web service. I just need to connect to a database, and then once I connect to a database, I need to make it available to others to use that connection. Right? So I'm going to say, let's say var db, and I'm going to export this db. So it'll be module.exports equals db. So now this db object is available to whoever imports this file. Okay, so let's see. Let's see. So really, I need to not load this app.js because it's going to try and create two connections at once, and you can't have more than one connection going to a database. So from the model, I can load my DB, var DB. I can load it from database. Okay, so that's going to load the connection. Now that I have the connection, I can create the user model using the connection. Actually, no, I don't need that just yet. I can just load it using the mongoose dot model, and create the user model right here based on the user schema. All right, so I have the user model here. So here I'm supposed to put all the functionality that would allow me to manipulate the user objects. All the functionalities, such as being able to create a brand new user, finding a user by username, finding a user by credential, and so forth. So let's work on one of them to get us started. Let's get started with maybe login. Login will need a way to retrieve somebody from the database that has a particular username and password. Although we won't have a username, we won't have a user to match yet. So maybe we should work on creating a user first. Okay, so let's do that. Let's create a brand new user. So let's encapsulate that in a function called createUser, and takes as argument a user. Yes. Now, to use Mongoose, we would use the we use a user model to create, and then just pass in the object that you want us to create. Right? Hopefully the user object, this user object, has username, first name, last name. It has all the right field names and value data types, and it's correct. Right? And it is going to send an asynchronous call to a database, and once it's done, it's going to return a promise. Yes? Right? So what we need to do is create an object that includes all these functions. Right now it's just one of them. Right? So one of the ways that we could do is to add them to the model. Add them to the model. And then make the model available to anybody outside here. Actually, I didn't need this. So I'm going to expose this. I'm going to say module exports and then user model. So now anybody who wants to use this this function can import this, require this file, and what they'll get is this. right? That instance object, right? And that instance object, it will be able to, that instance object will be able to, we will be able to call createUser through there. All right. So let's try that. Let's try. Now, who would use this? Who would use this function to create the user? Well, the service would use it, right? The service in this post function that registers a user. Notice what it's doing, right? It's taking from the HTTP request. It's retrieving the user from the post that is coming from the Angular client, right? It's adding an ID. It's pushing it into array, and then it's returning the user that was just added to the array. Well, we could replace this. We could replace this and say, well, the ID, the database is going to take care of that, right? The database is going to handle that. I don't really want to store it in my local array. I really want to store it in the database. And the database is going to come back to me with the actual object that was added there, right, in the promise. Correct? So I don't really need these 3 lines. Instead, what I have to do is load this file and then call this function on it, right? That's really what I want to do. So what I could do is at the top of this, I could load that model. I could say var user model. Load this model over here. Where is it? It's one level up, then down to models, down to user models. Now what's this? This user model is now this instance right here, because that's exactly what I'm exporting. See that? That's what I'm making available to anybody who requires me. They're going to have access to that object, which happens to have as one of its properties a link to that create user. See that? Right, so now I have user model. In my post register object, I could use the user model dot create user. Notice that it sees it, right? It sees that it's now part of that instance. And I can pass the user object right here. This is going to return to me what? A promise. So I should be able to say then, and the actual user object that had been inserted into the database will be available right here, ready for me to send it back as a JSON object, as a response back to whoever called me in the post. See that? Right? All right. Let's see if we missed something in Mongoose. Okay. All right. So let's try this out. Let's start the server. Let's restart the server, and let's bring this up again. I'm going to log out, and I'm going to register. So I'm here, and this is where the moment of truth. We have on the left-hand side we have the registration, and we have the network, which is going to go out to the server. So let's try and add Dan. Register, and looks like it went out. It looked for Dan. It couldn't find Dan. And it sent out a post. It sent out a post sending over Dan. There it is. And the response, this looks promising. Notice that it came back with an ID, right? That looks like it was actually inserted into a database. We can actually check to see the database that we're connecting to is here, right? It's this one. We can go and connect using the command line interface, use that database, and show the collections. And notice that it's using user models, right? User models. That's probably because when we created the schema, the user schema, right, we never told it what the collection we actually want to use. right? So we can say collection user, right? So to try this again, let's see if indeed it made it in there. db dot user model. Oops. User model. Dot find. There's Dan. See that? That's the user we did create. So indeed, it was able to add it here. I don't remember what we were doing with the other user here, the user collection. Okay, so I guess we were playing around with Alice here. So let's drop both of them and let's restart. Let's do db.user.drop, and let's drop the other one too. User models. And let's see, show collections. There are no collections. Let's restart. Let's restart this, and let's go back and let's try read register. And let's see, there are no collections, right? No collections. Let's register now as PO. Register. Okay, didn't complain. If we show the collections, notice that we still have user models. What? Oh, probably because we have to restart the server, right? It didn't read our new code. So let's restart the server. Let's try it again, and let's try register. PO register. Okay, there's our user. So db user.find. There's our PO. Okay, so indeed we are hitting it. We are getting an error here in the server, and notice that it's coming back with a timeout that it never failed. It never came back, and the reason is that this one did the post, right? And this was using the get, which we never rewrote. We never wrote it, right? It's never actually going to a database. Right, so it's not finding this user. Right, it's not finding the user. We just created it, and we were trying to go to the profile for that particular user. But that user, it's looking for it in the array. Right, it's still using the old way of retrieving users. Right, so the post is working, but the get is not working. So let's work on the get now.